We're now live on YouTube. I now make it 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting. It brings great sadness to learn that our colleague, friend and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Jim Carpenter, has sadly passed away. I'd like to send our condolences to his family and friends at this sad time. Councillor Carpenter deserves so much more than a few words from colleagues at a management meeting. Therefore, I placed an agenda item on full council on Wednesday the 3rd of February so we can pay our respects properly. This will give us all the time to come to terms with his sad news so we can share our good times we had with a great man who worked hard for Skegness. Please can I ask all councillors and staff to email all your ideas so we can give Councillor Jim Carpenter the best send-off and the one he truly deserves. Thank you. Okay, tonight's meeting, good evening. If you've joined us on Zoom, and colleagues, welcome. It's Wednesday the 20th of January, 7 p.m. Here's the agenda. Item 1, minutes of the last meeting which are attached. Page 8, 9, 10 and 11. Have we a proposer? Councillor Claxton?
I propose that we move these minutes, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Burnham. All in favour, please show with the virtual hands. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, to note apologies received by the Town Clerk prior to the meeting. Town Clerk, please.
We have apologies, Mayor, from councillors Blackburn and Empson.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, to receive any declarations of interest. Councillor Cunnington.
Yes, Mayor. I'd just like to declare an interest for the planning items. I'm a member of the ELDC planning, so I'll leave the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yep, just the same as Councillor Cunnington. I'll be leaving the meeting before the planning due to being on it at East Lindsay.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, same here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
And Councillor Edgington, please.
Yeah, same as the previous colleagues. Same reasoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Please lower your virtual hands. Moving on to agenda item number 4, the governance report Q3. Report and appendices attached to include provision of income and expenditure and balance sheet, bank reconciliations to follow, risk register and outstanding actions. Are there any comments?
I run through the sections quickly. In the financial section, since the last quarter report, there's been a slight improvement in the finances, but this is consistent with what was discussed when the budget was agreed. I can answer any detailed questions on any of the points in section 2, but I'll summarise by saying, as is set out in 2.3.1, that there's still about £155,000 worth of expenditure in the last quarter to be incurred. And with the current reserves sitting at around £228,000, that's for the general reserve and the current year reserve. Once that expenditure's gone out, that will reduce that to around £73,000. We've got some monies that will go from earmarked reserves to support some of the financing of those things, which will be done at the end of the year, and obviously still some income, small amounts of income in. So it's a situation, as we discussed at full council in relation to the budget, that the reserve from the cemetery will need to be put into a level of sustainable level for the future at the end of the financial year. But if there's any questions on the finance section, I'll take that now before moving on to the risk section.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Anderson, please.
Yeah, thank you. Question is on employees' costs. I note from the actual spend in the years to 210,293. The current annual bid is 271,725. When it says expenditure costs, indirect expenditure on the bottom line for annual year to date is 270,721, and the budget is 357,029. Is that correct? Am I reading it correct?
That's correct. That's the annual budget and the expenditure to date.
Right. Are we falling in line with that?
We will be slightly overspent at the end of the year because the pay rise that we'd allowed for in the budget was slightly bigger than the pay rise. The pay rise was slightly bigger than what we'd allowed for. Staff training opportunities have gone down, so that will compensate a little bit, and mileage is down as well. So at the moment, it's sitting at just over 3/4 of the way for 3/4 the way through, but that doesn't. The employers' national insurance and superannuation runs a month behind, so we won't have. So we're slightly down. So I'm thinking it is probably around 78%, something like that at the moment. So that's. I think we're going to be 1 or 2% over at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Can't see any, so I'll move on to the next section, which is the cafe. There's a trading account. Obviously, within our normal accounts, it's difficult to show the trading accounts, and we've had to pull out the figures here. I think because we're getting grants in now in relation to the cafe, I believe by the end of the year that we'll be on a break-even situation with it. So, which is I think overall good news. Obviously, it's been a really difficult year. We've only been open for a very short period of time. We had all the setup costs at the beginning. We've had, costs of having to close down, and obviously some wastage as that's gone on, because obviously the longer it's shut, the more wastage that we've had to bear. So I'm thinking with those grants that are coming in that we will actually break even by the end of the year. Moving on to risk management. You look at the risk register, the highlight, I know it's difficult to see if you've got a black and white version, or unless you compare with the previous version of it, but I'll quickly run through the changes that we have in there. So the first one in relation to community engagement. Obviously, that's been more difficult during the current time because our plans for community engagement very much through the building of the cafe. So that's not gone ahead as we'd hoped to close down. We've got later on in this agenda, we've got a paper about insurance. So that's coming to the end of its long-term contract, and we have to renew that. So there's obviously the risks associated with doing that and getting the right cover. We put it on from council last time to monitor the tax base and impact that might have on the budget going forward. That's in there for future monitoring. The asset register has got to be reviewed as part of the insurance update, so we'll be going through that in detail with the insurers. As we've talked in the finance, we need to monitor reserves going forward, and that's important. We've got our annual fire risk assessment to undertake, which again is a bit more tricky because the building's closed at the moment. We need to look at some methods by which we can monitor staff sickness and have perhaps some occupational health service support for long-term sickness. It's not an issue. Obviously, I can't go into the details of it here, but it's not an issue that we've really had a problem with before. But there are occasions when occupational health input is useful and valid, but it is a paid service. So we'll have to look at that and see what the risks are going forward. The on page 12, the 07 is down for removal now because we've actually delivered the new community building. So I'm suggesting that that one can be removed. And those are the main changes in the risk register from the last call. If there's any comments on those, otherwise I'll move on to the next section.
Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's addressed to town clerk. Looking at the risk register, there's a lot of required actions which relates to councillors' lack of knowledge, skills and abilities. I wonder what are our plans to address those?
Well, as you know, normally there's access to the LAUC training facilities, which have been severely curtailed this year. So there has been a survey that's gone out recently, and I would urge councillors to respond to that, because I think that will help to shape what is going to be important for LAUC going forward. And if training and specific training is one of those, then there's an opportunity for all councillors to indicate what they think is important. There have been some training events which have been held via Zoom, and there's also some other online training that's available. So that it is a question of making sure that people keep up to date. I mean, obviously we do that through this forum to a certain extent, where new things, new challenges, I bring those up, and they either are for council decision or added to our risk register. There are some opportunities to become aware of stuff through that.
Yeah, my reason for asking, Mr. Mayor, is that I can see that the action to mitigate this risk is to go on training where available and where councillors are interested, but they're blue quarter after quarter after quarter, so that obviously isn't working. I know previously, and I don't know whether this is the case now, Steve, you used to keep a register of what training councillors had been on. Do you still?
We do.
Yeah, and our district councillors telling you what training they've been on at the district council level? So I'm thinking about the planning stuff. We have people sitting on planning with no planning training or little planning training, and they may have done some planning training at East Lindsey, no longer be on that committee. So to keep the log up to date, that's all I'm worried about. That we're not actually, we may have more skills here that aren't reflected in our risk register because our training logs aren't up to date.
It would be very useful to have that, because as part of the assessment for the Gold Award, we are required to keep a register of what training has been undertaken. But obviously, if we don't get that information, we can't record it.
No, maybe that's something you need to send out then, a little pro forma for people to fill out.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We'll do that. We'll do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was all.
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Can I just remind Councillor Saxton he's got his microphone on, please? Just break it. Councillor Simon Claxton, please.
Just a question. Am I allowed to go back to the bank statement to ask a couple of questions to the town clerk?
Yes, if you do quickly, sorry. Can I just get Councillor Saxon to turn his microphone off? I can only hear the background. Thank you. Councillor Clapson, sorry.
Yeah. Town clerk, sorry, just a couple of payments from December that I was would like to know what they're for. 23rd of December to Jewson's, £806.78. What did we buy? And the same day, David Taylor, £428.30. What was that for?
I'm sorry, I haven't got that information for tonight's meeting because that's normally something that's discussed at council when the payments are agreed. The bank statements are merely here for reconciliation purposes to show that the accounts have been reconciled to the bank accounts. So I haven't got the detailed information about payments that I would normally bring to council meetings. I'm sure the Deputy Town Clerk has taken a note of that. And what we'll do is I will have a look and get back to you by email.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dick Edgington, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just when Councillor Steve Kirk remarked a few minutes ago about training, well, those of us that's on the planning committee and indeed the planning policy committee of the district council, training is mandatory in order to actually serve on those respective committees. And it so happens that there is a training session this very Friday. So that, you know, without that training, you're disbarred from committee membership, which I think is absolutely right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? No, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on. So moving on to the next section, which is outstanding actions. Again, you've got a sheet there with outstanding actions on with changes highlighted. I identified. So running through those, the memorial safety tests are currently suspended due to lockdown. The remaining asset transfer that's been hanging around for probably the best part of a year is still waiting legal completion. If you recall, there were some questions relating to it's a particular piece of grass that goes between the junction of where Richmond Drive meets Seacroft end, and it goes to the railway line, and it went through a period where it was overgrown for some time, and it was agreed that the town council would take this over because it was missed from the original asset transfer. But there were certain assets on there, such as the hard path, bins and lights, that potentially carried big expenditure, and I've agreed with these that those won't be part of the asset transfer. So it just leaves us with the grass to cut and the hedges to keep trimmed back. So and that's once it's in a decent state to come over as well. But the legal part of it still is litigated at the moment. So until that happens, it's still not the town council's, albeit we are helping out with the cutting of the grass. Moving on from that, we've got the Jolly Fisherman paintings. Everything's ready for those to be unveiled and in the future, but obviously until we come out of lockdown and can have a reasonable opening ceremony for them, we're not going to. The item 65, which is the town council office move, now is marked for removal from the list of actions. The VE Day event on there, I would flag up I think a potential warning now that I think the 8th of May could well be difficult for this event. Now, whether council want to go back and look at a later summer event, maybe it's, this was part of, V-Day, the victory in the Second World War, but maybe there ought to be something that, or it could be used as a way of perhaps celebrating the move out of lockdown and the restrictions that we're under, but I think that would have to be later in the summer if that was the case. The item 69, the rails and bollards and tower gardens, that's been delayed because of our resources in the grounds team at the moment, and other work come in that we can't avoid. The A158 issue, we have got an offer from Lincolnshire County Council for a online meeting. It'll be during the day, and they want to restrict it to a small number of councillors rather than the whole of council. That's the offer that's on the table. So it might be that this evening you want to consider who that might be. I think they're looking for 2 or 3 councillors so that it can be a conversation rather than a grilling, as it were. Once we know that, we can get the date set up for that. The unpaid invoices, that's been resolved at this moment in time. The Jolly Fisherman process is on, as is the wedding ceremonies, is on the agenda for tonight. The securing sites from unauthorised occupation, we did have a look at that earlier on. We still haven't got a resolution to this without spending lots and lots of money. So my suggestion here is that we just monitor for a year and continue that monitoring and see what happens. If we need to act, then council can look again. The managed trees on land, there's a report tonight. Just an update, I'm getting on with the tendering of some of the other trees. It's proving to be a little bit more because because Brexit has actually changed the format of the website on which we post tenders, and as a result of that, it's taking quite a bit longer to actually work its way through, because it's a new website it has new criteria in there which I wasn't aware of until I tried to do it. And then the rest of the items are the Christmas trees in Tower Gardens. The money didn't come through for that. I don't know the current situation, whether there's still an ongoing conversation between those councillors giving the money and East Lindsey. I've heard no more. The community grants for our cafe, it looks as though those are still under consideration, but because we're currently shut, they won't open the conversation to that until we've got an opening date. So I'm going to go back to them in March and confirm whether we'll be opening in April or when. So that's the outstanding actions. Do you want, I can take some questions on those, because I can see some hands raised.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask a question regarding the ELDC councillors' community grant. I note from other district councillors, money has been given to parish councils regarding parish councils' work for behalf of the community. And I'm just wondering, it's not to the clerk actually, could I have an explanation from the district councils why community grant, which is public money, can't be spent in Skegness when on behalf of the residents of Skegness? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring, before I bring Councillor Kirk in, because he probably got something to say, I'm just going to bring Councillor Richard Cunnington in, because I know he has been chasing these grants, so maybe he's got some information before we go any further.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did have a conversation with Daisy Thursday or Friday of last week regarding these grants. And the way I understood it from Daisy, she was in conversation with Mr. Lana, our clerk, regarding the grant. She was aware that there are complications with us being shut, but she never said at any point that we couldn't have it. So I will go back to her, and I am aware that our grants obviously end next month, so it does need dealing with prior to then. But as far as I was concerned, there's just a conversation regarding the opening date due to the grant having to be used within a timescale of it being issued. She didn't want to issue it and then not be able to use it, or it'd be withdrawn for some reason. So it's not that we're withholding the money, it's that we don't want East Lindsey claiming the money back after the grant's been issued. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
This wasn't on the grant issue because I think Councillor Cunningham covered it adequately. You know, everybody chases through their grants when they make them, and you know, the grants team that would normally be involved in council grants, a lot of those have been involved in the business grants. So yeah, huge amount of work they've been trying to get through, and I'm sure it's nothing more than that delayed period. And my comment I wanted to make was around the VE Day celebrations, because I know how much work the VE committee did. And at the time when we cancelled the first one, I did suggest that if we couldn't have it at the right day, another option may be the 26th of June, which is slightly later, which is Armed Forces Day. So, you know, I just want to keep our options open so that all that work that was done can actually be utilised, because that will be a fantastic event whenever it happens. But it would be a shame to plan it for this May, knowing full well that there's a distinct possibility that we'd have to cancel that as well. So maybe the end of June date is something that the committee would consider working to instead. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Yes, exactly. A lot of effort went into it, and we don't want to be seeing it go to waste. Councillor Adrian Finlay, please.
Yeah, I've got just a couple of things. The 158, the issue of the 158 speed restriction, I would like to be part of that conversation with Lincolnshire County Council, if that's possible, please. Obviously, this all stemmed from my original motion, which is, you know, we are moving with it, but I would like to carry on with it and see it through to the bitter end. At least of them, you know, I'd like to just make sure that they are doing something, and if not, we can, you know, proceed with other angles till they do something. As regards to the VE Day, I can only mirror what Steve Kirk says. I think the Armed Forces Day is a cracking idea, but obviously it's all down to planning and whether that's, you know, puts too much pressure on the town clerk, deputy town clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finlay. I also share your concerns there with the it's my ward area on the road issue with the speed limit. Other councillors might want to get involved, but what really just getting my back up at times is when I take a walk around the town, probably 16, 17 months ago, and we were promised these road repairs, and then I send emails, which I still have, and then the town clerk was told that it wasn't a walk around with me. Well, I assure you I was there, and I do have the emails. So I would like to follow that through with you, because there's nothing worse than somebody saying that you wasn't there when it all happened, and there's writing to prove that. So just bear that in mind, please, councillors. Councillor Claxton, please.
Yeah, it's for the securing of the council sites for unauthorised occupation. I'd just like to know about the site for the Westway that the travellers occupied last year. I've noticed that it's still not secure. It's still got the temporary fencing.
A point of order, please. This is a public meeting, which is broadcast on YouTube. There are maybe certain things that we should discuss in private.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kirk. Yes, it's probably best if we're going to question that. We are aware of other things going on within within government at this moment in time. So maybe you want to ask that question via email, Councillor Claxton. And we need to take it so we're not breaking any code or anything. Councillor Richard Cunnington, did you? Sorry,
I just exercised my right to reply. It was just asking the council why it wasn't Georgia. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the town clerk will come back. Councillor Cunnington, did you leave your hand up from last time?
No, I would like to speak, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
On a different topic, on the A158 issues, I would be more than happy if we are making a decision tonight for the councillors to propose Councillor Finlay and yourself if you're interested.
Yes, thank you. I am interested, but if there was other councillors as well, maybe, but I just wanted to explain my thoughts of when people say I wasn't there when I was. I want to follow things through. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of points. The first one is obviously I agree with Councillor Steve Kirk regarding the VE Day. It would be pretty sad. We know this is dragging on. It would be very sad to try and organise it for May, knowing that it possibly wouldn't be as good as it could be. So moving it to the end of June, I think, would be a sensible idea. The other one is the securing of the council site. If I understood it correctly, I believe that the government are looking at bringing in a criminal trespass law, which would then allow the police, even if we'd left our gate open, if the travellers go onto the site and the landlord asks them to leave, the police can enforce them leaving. Now, this is obviously isn't law yet, but it was something I would love to see come in where we can shift them within a couple of days. So we need to bear that in mind before we spend a vast amount of money, as long as we can secure what we've got. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Mark Anderson, did you have your hand up again? Sorry.
No, I put it up again regarding the A158.
Thank you.
For those people that actually want to go on to and speak to the county council, of which I have no wish to, because I feel the officers saying that they only want to speak to 2 or 3 people. I think they're supposed to be civil servants and public officers, and I just feel that that is inappropriate. That they feel that they can only speak to 2 or 3 councillors about this issue. But I've looked at the guidelines. As you know, I was chair of the Planning and Regulation Subcommittee for a number of years on the County Council. And for those, and I'll make it the public aware, if you want a speed reduction there, which is outside the criteria, then look at the Lyndhurst Garden Centre, which has a pedestrian crossing there. If you have a pedestrian crossing in the middle of the island, adjacent to Skegness Grain, where there is an island there, ask or put in for a safe place to cross. I don't think it's safe where 60-mile-an-hour island is located there. Ask for a pedestrian crossing, and that will reduce the speed limit, as is in opposite the Lyndhurst Garden Centre, which isn't well used. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with regards to the VE Day event or whatever it's going to be, I think that is going to be one of the best events. I think we should make it one of the best events that we've ever had. It's going to be, it's going to be the first event, if it does come in June, that's happened for a long time. So yeah, very excited for that. And just with regards to the 158, if the council wouldn't mind, I'd also like to join, if no one else is, join Councillor Finlay and yourself, Mr. Mayor, on that conversation. And it may also be useful if I could maybe give Councillor Anderson a call at some point to have a chat about some of his tips, and because he's got a wealth of experience that would be wasted if we didn't take some advice from him. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully Councillor Anderson will accept that and pass on the information. Are we any further questions?
I'll just go on to the section 7, which is section 7, which is the operational section. You've got the communication figures in front of you. Obviously, YouTube is a new one that we're now monitoring. The others have been relatively stable through the 2 quarters. And sorry, I missed out the operational report. Castleton Boulevard, I think a few of you have noticed it's been tidied up and ready for spring next time. Play areas are still officially closed, although we can't actually easily prevent entry into those, but they are officially closed. Nothing on the allotments. Cemetery, we're still, unfortunately, it is the situation that we're getting a lot of burials now, and I can only think that this is as a consequence of what's going on. This is putting quite a strain on the team. As you can imagine, if you're one of the people who's digging graves, 2-3 times a week, it's not only the physical strain, but also the emotional impact that has as they realise what's happening. So we need to, make sure that we're supportive of those staff that are, undertaking that work. The Targos Pavilion defects period ends this week. We've had an inspection by the Clerk of Works, and we're just dealing with the report that's come out from that. So I will be reporting back to council with the outcomes. There's nothing of a huge, significant. There are a few repairs and remedial bits to deal with. Any new building. So that's really the report. So the report's there's some recommendations there. Obviously, some of them. One of the recommendations is if you've got anything else to deal with, and obviously there's a couple of proposals that have been made this evening that need to be incorporated.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to commend the grounds team for the work they're doing, and also to the clerk, if I can. Is it possible to view on YouTube? I know we've got the views, but to view how much watch time, the videos are getting, just so we can see if people are coming onto it, how long they're engaging with it, just out of interest, really. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can have a look at that. Look at that's provided. I have noticed over the last few weeks that we're starting to get a few more people subscribing to the channel. So presumably they will be people who will come back again. But yes, I mean, that's something, it's a new statistic this time, but I can certainly add some more information into that.
Thank you.
Councillor Sid Dennis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question to the town clerk, just to ease the pressure. Beg your pardon. Just to ease the pressure on the staff. Have you considered bringing in a micro digger or a mini digger to maybe help? Thank you.
We have considered that in the past. The problem that we've got is that the way that the cemetery has been designed is that all of the graves are banked together, and that would mean removal of stones potentially that wouldn't otherwise need to be removed, and also putting the diggers actually onto the graves of other people, and so that's the difficulty that we have. And some of the graves are quite small and narrow as we fill in the sections which are perhaps been there for well, now getting on for 40 years.
Okay. Councillor Dennis, did you want to come back? Sorry, I didn't hear that, Councillor Dennis. You're back. No, you're off. You're off. You are still off at the minute.
Thank you, Town Clerk. That's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, did you leave your hand up from last time? Sorry.
No, I didn't. I put it up again. In
Okay.
view of what the Town Clerk has said, we as council, we are getting larger with our workforce, and we have a duty of care to our workforce, which is enshrined in employment law. I note what the Town Clerk has said about our grounds team, and I know the physical activity may be causing our workforce distress and long-term sickness. Therefore, I would like a paper regarding occupational health and the costs associated with that, because we have, as I said, a duty of care towards our staff, maybe at the next management committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And as for those, if you put your hand up, just please bear with me. We've got a new hands on the screen, and sometimes they don't show up straight away with the colour they are. So please bear with me. I'm getting used to it after 10 months now with a new setup. Anybody else wishing to speak? No. Any further info on this from Town Clerk?
Well, it's just really, I think, for the now for the voting. So is to approve the bank reconciliations for the quarter, to note the income and expenditure and balance sheet, to confirm that you've reviewed the risk register, and if there's any issues there. So Councillor Anderson, for example, has raised an issue there. To note the movement on the task list, and you may wish to add into that the movement of the date for the VE Day event. And then if there's any other things that you wish to raise in the council, then that would be the opportunity to do it at that point.
Yeah, well, I think what Councillor Cunnington mentioned and Councillor Billy Brooks came in. I think there's three of us that'd like to go on a panel there on the meeting for the A158.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Simon Claxton, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Oh yeah, but just said about moving through the bank statements. Will I still be able to go back and at the next meeting and ask questions about that if we move them now?
Clark.
Are the questions about payments or the actual validity of the bank statement reconciliation? If it's about payments, then I fear that those payments have already gone through council in December, in which case, I mean, you can email me and I'll answer any question you've got always, but in terms of raising an issue about them, if council's already approved them, there's nothing that can be done in that situation. But I can certainly give you any information that you want. If you want to detail any question about a payment, I'm more than happy to provide that information to you. If it's a question about the validity of the actual reconciliation, then that is proper for that to be raised here. But obviously, I'd like to understand in what way does the reconciliation not work.
In my understanding there of Town Clerk, I just think Councillor Claxton was asking for the information who the payment was, which you don't have to hand tonight, but we'd pass it on. Councillor Claxton?
Yeah, that's all it was. I was just asking what it was and what it was for.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I'll put it in an email
Okay.
and we'll go from there.
Lovely, thank you very much. So it's been proposed by Councillor, moved by Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Yeah, more than happy to second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Ty. Oh, no, he's lost his hand. Okay, so I think we're going to the vote then, please. All in favour, please.
Mayor, can I, just before you do, can I check that you are moving the date for the VE Day and the issues that were also raised on the risk register that Councillor Anderson raised?
Okay,
Yes, that is correct, Town Clerk.
Yeah, so we are moving the date, which I think at this moment in time is a good thing to do.
And the three councillors to attend the meeting with Lincolnshire County Council.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a proposal and a seconder, so all in favour, please raise. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, council insurance. The report is attached to inform the council of any upcoming expiry of the council's insurance, to set out the next level, next steps, and write off some old equipment. Town clerk, please.
If you've got any questions about the insurance, the deputy town clerk is actually dealing with this and would be able to answer that. I'll just quickly mention the tablet PCs. There was a suggestion that these could be handed over for school children who don't have access to the right technology. The issue is that the tablets are now quite old. Many of them don't work. Obviously, we don't. If councillors are, those few councillors that have still got them, they're using them, then that's fine to continue to use them. But if anybody's got them and they don't need them anymore, they could be returned, or those that we've got in store, we can drag out, see which ones are actually still working in some format, and then we would just wipe our data off and then pass them on through the BBC system for collecting these, and they then do a complete check to make sure that, there's not anything inappropriate on them, and that they're working okay.
Okay,
But it would require a write-off from the asset register.
Thank you. As you know, I emailed in regarding this as soon as I've seen the from the BBC putting out there for children. And I think if we've got them tucked away in the drawer and they're no good to us, if one child can read a book on one, then it's something good. And I think it's better than, we stick mobile phones in the drawer thinking we'll sell it one day, and we look back 10 years' time and we put it in the bin. So I think it's good. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They were of dubious use when they were originally purchased, unfortunately. Many issues were raised as to the performance and how fit for purpose they were for certain members. I think it's a great idea giving them to schools, but in my opinion, I don't think they'll get commissioned for that at all. I don't think the software would be fit for purpose on something with such small storage. So whilst it's a great idea in principle, I wouldn't personally invest too much time in it because I don't think they'll get used. The technology at the time when they were purchased was low tier, which is obviously what was budgeted for. So yeah, that's my observation. Noting that altogether, though, I would happily support that, and I'll propose that we adopt A, B, and C on block.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I've got no problems with the asset or disposable of the asset, but my question is, if there is a councillor who, whilst we're in these extraordinary times, needs IT equipment, and the affordability question comes into play, if they can't afford, therefore, is there a means where a town councillor has some method of getting communication with the town council if we dispose of all these tablets?
Thank you. The town clerk will answer that, but I don't believe that any one of us is using anything. Some of us never had them from the start, but we'll find out in a second. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, just with regards to them tablets, if we can make any use of them and donate them to people, that's great, because I don't know if you've all seen the Sky News Eyewitness programme that was filmed in Skegness. It really highlighted some of the difficulties that a lot of the children are really quite facing at the minute, especially ones that, are living in caravans. And I think there's a boy on there that actually wrote a history essay on 9/11, I believe, on his iPhone. So people are struggling out there. So if we can do anything to help, that'd be great. But I'd second this going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, just generally on the insurance. I know we've taken over the Tower Gardens, a very nice building in it now, and we've had issues with the trees. I was just wondering question to the town clerk, really. If this policy, or whether you've looked into the policy, whether it involves storm damage or flooding. Now we've got the Tower Gardens. Obviously, there is the potential of trees falling and stuff damaging either the buildings, the railings, the parks, which is all listed within the insurance. So I just wondered if there was natural disasters, so to speak, within the policy, or whether they were separate. Thank you.
Well, obviously the policies will be those that we're looking at going forward. I mean, in respect to the building will be insured for risks that are insurable. We should be able to get flood risk because of the measures that were taken when it was built, which were approved by the Environment Agency in terms of the flood risk plans, etc. In terms of Tower Gardens itself, things like falling trees tend to be covered for public liability. I think we would have a great deal more difficulty in getting affordable insurance for things like trees falling on railings. That might just be something that we have to self-insure against, because I think the cost of premiums would probably be prohibitive. But we are covered for public liability. So if something happens that is a result of the town council doing something and it injures someone or injures somebody's property, then that's when we would call on that liability insurance. But I mean, the deputy town clerk is probably more au fait with the details of the policy than I am, because she's the one who tends to lead on this. So if there are any specific questions, I don't know whether Kate, you've got any comments on that.
No, just reiterating what you're saying, really. Parcels of land per se you can't insure, but as you say, we've got our public liability, we get insurance for that, and our employee liability, and then we insure all our assets, so all our buildings, and we insure our furniture, our street furniture, we insure the contents for the buildings, and then we also have a list of things that are all risk. So that means wherever they are, whether a lot of items move around, might be in vans, might be in lockups, might be out working. So those items are listed as all risks that are covered for. So we're just working on going through that full inventory, making sure we're covered for everything that we need. So I'm going through the policy, the assets, the contents in depth, and then it's about finding the right provider for the insurance, because that's actually, I find, the most difficult part. There's a lot of insurance companies there who just don't know how to deal with councils, especially town and parish councils of our size. They can deal with little councils, with precepts a lot less than ours. But yeah, that work's ongoing. I will get 3 quotes and bring all that information back to you in the March Council, so you can make a decision on which insurance provider to move forward with.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Anderson, did you have your hand up from last time? I think you did this time. I'm not sure.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's been proposed that we move these on block A, B and C. To note the report that the tablets are written off and working devices are donated to the BBC Homeschool.
Before we take the vote, Mr. Mayor, just could the town clerk answer my question I raised?
Town clerk, please.
So yeah, I mean, the situation is, in the last 2 years, I haven't had a councillor come forward and say that they haven't got the technology. So I'm not perceiving that as being a problem at this time. And indeed, when we looked at providing and provided some of the equipment previously, some councillors, especially those that are on district council and perhaps on other bodies as well, where they use technology, it's very easy to end up with multiple devices, which is difficult to manage. So at this moment in time, I'm not seeing a problem with that. But I mean, if it was a problem, then that would have to be something for council to look at and to resolve going forward.
Thank you. That's answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Town Clerk. Okay, it's been proposed that we move these on block and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 6, bins in the Vine Walk. Report attached. To consider providing larger bins on Vine Walk.
This report is in response to a few complaints that we've had about bins overflowing on Vine Walk. When we took over the areas in Vine Walk, we staffed for what would be a normal winter and summer arrangement. So we have more staff available in the summer on annualized hours to carry out these tasks. This winter has been very different in that we're seeing the bins being filled far more quickly than we would usually. I think that's probably because we've got more people out walking, taking exercise, and especially with the dogs and what have you. I've raised it with the team, and they're, as I've already mentioned, they're at capacity at the moment to undertake any extra work. One solution is that we could provide some additional bin capacity on Vine Walk. The sorts of bins that we use are ones that have things like, extinguishers and, the metal things that drop so they can't be set fire, and also got keys and what have you. They're quite expensive, and I would estimate with the fitting of them, we're looking at something like £1,000 for each bin. If we were to replace 3 of the smaller bins with that £3,000, we haven't got that budgeted, but you could potentially fund it from the public property earmark reserve as a one-off expenditure. There might be some additional, there will be some additional refuse disposal costs, but at this moment in time, it's not possible to quantify how much that would be.
Okay, thank you. Still got Councillor, if you've got your hand up and you're not wishing to speak, please lower it. I've got a few. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I have noticed that the bins are, getting a bit full, but it's quite clearly understandable why this is, and I think it's just one of them things. Bigger bins might be the answer, but would we still be able to retain the current? So would there be additional bigger bins, or would they be a replacement? I suppose is my question.
Okay, thank you, Town Clerk.
I would suggest replacing them, because otherwise it makes the bin collecting round longer and harder. So I would suggest perhaps removing those dog bins. I mean, they could be used in somewhere, reused in somewhere like Tower Gardens, where we've obviously got the gardeners and that might be quite useful for things like summer events when bin capacity is not always enough. So it could be possible to move those to Tower Gardens if they're in a fit state, of course. But I would suggest removing them and replacing them with, if that's what you want to do. I mean, clearly we might go back to normal next year and they might not be needed, and that's something that you need to weigh up.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, due to previous employment, I've got a lot of knowledge of these bins. Now, I'd just like to say that consistency of the bins in the past was at least 3 to 4 times a week, probably checked daily. One problem with larger bins, it's like a concern that's already been raised. We've got a duty of care to our staff. Dog feces in these bins gets very heavy. It also gets wet, which means it's dripping down people's legs as they're trying to carry the bins away. Bin bags split in, you've got the smells, you've got chances of maggots and things, which occurs, especially in the summer when it gets hotter. So I would be against replacing the bins with bigger bins. The dog walks in the winter are used regularly by the local people because they can get out and about down there without all the visitors and things that we have down these walks. So I personally feel that bigger bins would be more of a hazard to us than adding extra bins. It's more the consistency of changing the bins more regular. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunnington. Can I just clarify on that though, Councillor Cunnington? I walk through there every day in the season, and I've reported it over the last 6 years myself. They wasn't checked regular at all, and they were overflowing. So just on that one, they haven't been emptied regular. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I myself use those walks quite regularly. I've often seen large items disposed of in the bins, especially around Christmas time as well. I have significant concerns that if we are using large bins, that's fine, but they'd have to be of such a design it would make it impossible to dispose of large things. When I mean large, I'm referring to large full carrier bags, rucksack type size. I have seen them in the bins, and it doesn't take much of that to make it completely full. I do take Councillor Cunnington's point on board with regards to large bins being a significant hazard. I'm sure the clerk would grace us with an idea as to how frequent bins are changed, because in my opinion, if a bin is changed once a week, that is not acceptable. It needs to be far more regular, and that will need budgeting accordingly. So I'd kindly await for the clerk to reply if he has that information to hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. I too, where I live, we have a public footpath as well, which again is well used during the lockdown, and it is extremely full with dog fetus along the walk on the bins that there are. But there is a lot of dog fouling. The dog warden has been around and put some signs up because of the problem with dogs. Not the dogs, it's the irresponsible, hate to say this, local residents who do not dispose and take the dog mess back with them and dispose of it properly. But £1,000 is an awful lot of money for 3 bins, because where I live, and I think it's I've forgotten the name of it now, the 5th walk, we have the same problem. And I'm just going to ask if Councillor Sid Dennis could help with his expertise, because £1,000 a bin in situ is an awful lot of money when we're tight on resource. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Dennis in later if he wishes to speak. I've got Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I live virtually on the back of Vine Walk, and it doesn't take long for a resident to come knocking on my door if there's overflowing bins. Most of them are understanding of the situation at the present. There's a lot more people using that walk because there's a lot more people at home instead of at work. They're taking their exercise, and same as Councillor Dan Kirk had said, we do get a lot of large carrier bags, like he says, at Christmas time. They don't want to put it, or they maybe not be able to fit it in their household bin, so they take it on the Vine Walk. I wouldn't support larger bins. £3,000 for 3 bins seems a lot of money. And as the clerk has said, once lockdown's over, will they continue to be used as much? If so, then I think we should look at larger bins next year. I think we need to get through the lockdown, keep telling the residents that we're doing our best. It's lockdown, it's COVID, which it clearly is. And they go away fairly happy. I say, I'll get on to the town clerk. And I just think that, we just don't want to be spending £3,000 on 3 new bins. Could I also ask, there used to be some plastic bins with like a concrete weight at the bottom. they were spread about down there as well as the other bins. I just wondered if they were still there or if they had been removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dick Edgington, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the debate around Vine Walk, I mean, it is essential that we have adequate bin provision, because what always concerns me is if there isn't provision for people to dispose of rubbish, they would just dispose of it either side of the path. And we don't want to give people the excuse to say, well, I'm not taking the rubbish home, I'm just going to throw it in the undergrowth, because Vine Walk and indeed Coronation Walk, they're nice amenities for the area, and we don't want them despoiling with people wantonly disposing of rubbish using the excuse that there isn't adequate bin provision for them. But I also take the point that said by other councillors, £1,000 to install a bin does seem an awful lot of money. I would have thought something like that could have been installed at somewhat cheaper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you start talking about £4,000 for bins, why don't you just look at getting the bins emptied more regular? I mean, to me, I would think, looking at it, they're emptied once a week. If you emptied twice a week, then the bins would be empty most of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, will be using the walk less frequently than I used to, but as a regular walker down there, last summer and last spring, I was commented on by other people about how good it was that the bins weren't overflowing now. So I do believe this is a COVID-related issue, and I would support those who suggest we try and, where possible, find an alternative to putting big bins in. Big bins are very expensive. And when we costed the bins for the foreshore, I was absolutely gobsmacked when they were coming in at 1,500 and £2,000 for a large bin, which will take the salty air and all that sort of thing without rusting out in 5 or 6 weeks. So, you know, big bins that for the public realm are expensive. I don't really think they're necessary. Yes, it's an inconvenience, but as Councillor Danny Brooks did say, most people, if you explain, oh yeah, I can understand. Yeah, there's a lot more about that sort of thing. So, if at all possible, if we can't arrange to have increased collections, I just think it might be one that we can actually just ride out. Hopefully, come the end of February, lockdown will start easing, and less people will be using the walks because they'll be going about their usual business, or maybe even, God forbid, actually being able to go to work. So I couldn't support large bins because I just think they're going to cause more trouble than they actually solve.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, you got your hand up. Sorry, you had your microphone on mute. Sorry, I didn't hear any of that. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll lower it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dennis, did you want to come back and just on the back of what Councillor Anderson said? Or?
Yeah, I can do that, Mr. Mayor. Dog feces, the problem is it's a hazardous waste. It can't go in with your general waste. It's a bit of a different ball game. I think that Danny's come up with a voice of reason there, and I totally agree with him. And Councillor Kirk, I think we need to, 2 or 3 months from now, hopefully, with a little bit of help from the vaccine and the way we're behaving, we'll be out of this. And I don't think bigger bins are the answer. Not at all. I think you're looking to put the public and the members of staff in peril, and because that's how bad it is. We as a professional wheelie bin business, we don't do kennels and things like that, because if you can imagine get it squashed up in a dustbin lorry, you can imagine the state of affairs is for my staff and stuff like that. So I do agree with that, and I do believe, no disrespect to members of the public, but they do have a duty of care. And if they take their dog for a walk, they should take their dog mess home with them. Okay, and I don't think it's something that we need to be involved in, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Cunnington did propose that we say no to large bins. Councillor Dankirk, sorry, you've got your hand back up.
Yeah, I was just awaiting for a response from the clerk as per my question.
Sorry.
Yeah, we actually empty the bins in winter time once per week. In the summertime, we do it more frequently, and it does vary in the summer depending on the grass cutting as well, because if the grass cutting team are down there, they will dispick and empty the bins whilst they're doing some of the work as well. So there's a much more frequent, which then that reflects on why Councillor Stephen Kirk noted that it was better in the summer months, because we are collecting it more regularly in the summer.
Thank you. Councillor Cunnington?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I just take some notes from other councillors on board with my proposal of not changing to larger bins, but could we insist that from the clerk that the bins are looked at twice a week at minimum? Thank you.
Mayor, you can certainly insist on that, but what I'll be doing is coming back and saying, can I have some more staff then, please? Because, and by the way, you've set the budget, so that would have to come from some reserve, and it would put a pressure on the preset for next year. These are the questions. It's not, we can't magic resources. I've already said many times, well, this evening and in the previous meeting, that our grounds team are up against it at the moment. That is the situation. We're managing with once a week. We can't do twice a week or 3 times a week with the staff resources that we've got. We would have to have more resources.
Thank you. I think it's a correct thing to listen to Councillor Steve Kirk at this moment in time. We're in unprecedented times, and I think hopefully it's just a short blip, because as I said, them bins never used to get overlooked all the time. I was constantly on about bins, and to the town clerk at the time about grass every night when I walked through. And since we've taken over the grass cutting, them bins have been a lot emptier in the summer, even during busy times. So I hopefully it is just a short-term thing. I think we should stick with Councillor Steve Kirk on this one just to see it through. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've, as we've all said, we've listened to Councillor Dennis, who is actually the expert on this. Big bins will cause us big problems. I think we've got to ride it out. You can't expect the staff to do any more than they're doing. You know, because of COVID, there's more burials, there's more work. It's all intertwined, and I think we've just got to ride it out. But I will say this: I don't get half, not even a third amount of people complaining about the bins on the Vine Walk now, even in COVID, than I used to do when East Lindsey ran them. And that's not, no disrespect to anybody, but that is a fact. So I think we just need to ride this out. Obviously, if next winter it's the same, then we'll have to look at it. But right now, we're under pressure. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask a question to the town clerk, really? How many bins is there on the Vine Walk? Do we know?
I don't have the information just to hand, but I think there's 3 on Beresford Field alone, and then there's 2. There's 1 at each of the junctions and at each end, I believe. So we're probably hitting. Town clerk probably knows better than I do, because she walks it.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there'd be any mileage in putting a little sign near each bin, just to remember, just to remind the public, if the bins are under pressure, please take your waste home. I don't think that would be a significant expense, really. I don't know what other councillors feel. Would there be any mileage in that? Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
No, happy to take that on board, Mr. Mayor. Anything just to try, like you say, we've just got to ride out for a few short months. I mean, my proposal to look at them twice a week would be probably an hour to change them. So I wasn't asking drastic amounts, but if we can't do that, no, quite happy to take on board Councillor Dennis's amendment and just put a notice by the bins, please use a different bin if this is full or something.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. It just helps remind the public to maybe take the rubbish home. And it is always just that little thing there that might make the difference.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, whilst I do support like a sticker or something being stuck to the actual bin, I feel like some of the signs that I've seen next to the bins in Skegness can sometimes, after a couple of months, end up looking like litter themselves, just because of the way they degrade so quickly. But definitely support if it's more of a sticker kind of thing on the bin.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, that's what East Lindsey have done around Beacon Park. I remember the name now. It's Georgia Fifth Walk, which is well used by the local residents with their dogs walking up to Winthorpe. There is a lot of dog mess on King George V Walk, and the dog, as I said, the dog warden's been out painting or with the footpath at my request because of the problem with children using the public open spaces, etc. Because of, and I say it again, it's not the dogs, it's the owners who are letting this happen. But I totally agree with Councillor Dennis. If we put a sign up reminding people that it is their responsibility to empty these, not to empty these, to take the poo bags home with them and litter home with them, rather than overfill the bins. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that something we can do, Town Clerk?
We can certainly look at putting some signs up, along the way there.
Okay, thank you. So you've got your proposal in front of you, and it's been seconded, inclusions of the signs and to write it out. So all in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, ash dieback, tree removal, vine and coronation walk. The report and appendix attached.
I don't intend to say a lot about this. The report is in front of you for noting. The next stage is to get a press release jointly agreed with East Lindsey District Council, and I have a meeting with them, virtual meeting with them on Friday to start looking at that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk, please. No, sorry. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, didn't mean to do that.
Councillor Dick Edgington.
Okay, I'll move it be noted, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Edgington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was passed by the Planning Committee of the District Council last time we met, as colleagues on the committee here tonight will know. I think it's an opportunity here to do one or two other things, if at all possible. I mean, there is a problem because of the trees, the mature trees going back many, many years. And of course, over the last 30, 40 years, the houses have been close to them. And that does cause problems for the occupants of those properties. I'm not talking about leaves falling, in the autumn and that, but large branches getting too close to properties and so forth. And of course, all the trees are currently subjected to a tree preservation order, and they can't be touched unless they get permission of the local authority. And with these 150 trees over a period of time, it's going to look quite, in places, quite sparse. But the report, as it says, they're going to be replaced with more suitable tree species, which hopefully will cause less problems. But while we're at it, and I did mention to the clerk before that anybody that's been down there will notice there's often the trees are festooned with pairs of trainers where they've tied the laces together and slung them in the trees, and it looks rather unsightly. And it was saying to me, people are going, if contractors are having to deal with these, remove these trees and so forth, I would have thought, to remove some of those unsightly trainers a bit from up there. I mean, it's bad enough in the summer, but in the winter, when the leaves have dropped and that, it looks quite unsightly. And people that live in houses that back onto Vine Walk have complained to me about it, and it's quite noticeable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, they're quite high up as well. I wouldn't want to be climbing. Councillor Jimmy Brooks, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to leave the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, didn't realise my hand was up.
Okay, no problem. So we've had it propose that we note this from Councillor Anderson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Burnham, thank you. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 8, continuation of remote meeting. The report is attached. Consider lobbying government to extend the period in which remote meetings can be held.
Mayor, under current legislation, the ability to run remote meetings expires at the beginning of May. I understand that government will be reconsidering the position of extending it further, and it has come out through the National Association of Local Councils whether or not councils would wish to lobby for that to continue. My reports out how I think how the meetings have gone so far, and I think moving forward there are certainly some benefits of being able to continue to have the opportunity, even if council doesn't take that opportunity, but at least have the provision in legislation for it to happen in the future. And my recommendation would be to council that you do lobby for this. I can give you a few examples. I mean, as far as things like working groups are concerned, they're not formal council meetings and are not governed by the legislation, so we can continue to do those anyway. Things like planning, for example, members of the public have far better access to actually see the plans and what you're actually discussing via video conferencing, where we can broadcast it and broadcast the detail of the actual plans at the time of discussion than in a room. We've also had more people engaging via YouTube than we've had, certainly for committee meetings, visiting the meetings in person. So, and lastly, as a business continuity backup, if there were to be a flood or some other disaster that prevented council from meeting, the ability to be able to meet by virtually in this way would allow council to continue to make decisions. So I think even if council don't then use that power, I think it's a useful power to have. So that's why I would urge council to authorise me to lobby through LAUC and now for government to continue to allow parish and town councils to have this power.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you very much. I thoroughly support that. I think virtual meetings, whilst you don't get the cut and thrust of debate that you get at a real meeting, which is something which is lost at full council, it becomes more of an administrative process more than anything else. The benefits are, particularly for working groups, the fact that if I'm working away in London or Birmingham or Manchester, wherever it may be, I can still attend a working group as long as I can put aside that 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be. And let's not also forget, none of us are driving around Skegness to get to meetings. So the fact that we're having a positive impact on the environment, I think is a good enough reason to do it without any of the other good reasons as well. So I'd fully support that we ask the town clerk to lobby national government to allow us to continue to do virtual meetings should we wish to do so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to support the town clerk also for the reasons as he stated, but also we have the duty of care, I said to our staff, but also to other councillors as well. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I can't see the restrictions being lifted until the summer. There are some elderly councillors like myself around that are vulnerable, and we have a duty of care, as I said, in the middle of a pandemic, to look after not only our staff but each other as well. So I'd like to support the town clerk on the reasons as he's given, but also on public safety reasons as well. That's us.
Thank you. Councillor Dankirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I 100% agree with the clerk in respect to the planning. I think it's actually better to do it virtually to be able to then see in real time with the screen share. I think that's probably more productive. I just would also like to note that there are many occasions where certain councillors are struggling to access the meeting and participate effectively, and I'd like to ensure that the clerk and the team, or even yourself, Mr. Mayor, are supporting those councillors with that, because still we have instances of councillors not being able to raise hands virtually, not being able to speak, and I fear that their voice may be getting missed using this platform. We're now, 10 months in, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dankirk. Councillor Sid Dennis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all councillors, but I think we should go further than that. I think we should, moving forward in the future, be able to do mixed meetings, virtually and face-to-face. I don't see, if there's people in a position or people are away, that they can't join virtually as well as live. I'd like to see a mix, if that would be at all possible. I don't know what the town clerk's view on that, whether we've got the technology, but I would like to see that, if that's possible.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I totally support the thought of having it. The only problem we do have in Skegness is that some of us suffer with bad Wi-Fi, and that can be a problem.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, generally, I think it's a brilliant idea. It makes it convenient, like Councillor Steve Kirk says, for us all to attend the virtual meetings. I have got a little bit of a doubt inside my mind regarding it, if anything has been thought towards the public. Traditionally, the public has always, we've had a public gallery, public participation. Since we've been having these Zoom meetings, questions to council from the public have been pretty much zero, have they? I mean, I could only remember maybe one or two since we started, whereas when we've got face-to-face in the public gallery, the public normally turn up and there is always questions to be asked. So my only concern is if we do carry this on through the pandemic, fair enough, but will this go on after restrictions are eased, and will we go back to face-to-face meetings, or are we talking long-term beyond the pandemic? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my concern is over the last 9 months that we've been doing this, I've noticed that Councillor George Saxon has had trouble, and so has Councillor Paul Sutton. I mean, if you look at Paul tonight, he's only got a phone, so he's having to do everything on his phone. So he's not being able to vote. He can listen in, but by the time he gets round to putting his hand up to vote or watch the video, it's a struggle for him. So I think we need to bear that in mind. I have no problem whilst we're in the pandemic, obviously, but I would go as far as Councillor Dennis said, and I don't know if we have got the technology, but after the pandemic, you could go to a live and like Zoom, so that wherever, if somebody can't make it because they're in Manchester, as Councillor Kirk said, it could actually still be there, because we could need his expertise, same as Councillor Dennis. If he was away, he could get on Zoom. We could need their expertise. So I think that would be the way to go. Then any councillor that's got no Wi-Fi can turn up to the meeting. And if somebody who can't make it could actually be on Zoom at the meeting. So I think that's probably the way to go.
Thank you. Yes, it might actually reduce some of the apologies needed to be put in as well. So we could find a benefit from that. Councillor Saxon, you've got your hand up, not virtually, but you've got your hand up. This is one of the reasons why we want you to speak. You're on mute at the moment. Councillor Saxon, you're still on mute. No, I'll come back to Councillor Saxon. Because we can't.
Do you want me to answer while we're waiting?
Yeah.
Do you want me to answer a couple of the questions there?
Feel free.
This paper isn't suggesting that council would then hold all meetings in the future virtually. What it's saying is, can we have the power to enable council to decide to hold them virtually should they want to? And as I've mentioned, things like business continuity. So if there was a massive flood, council could still meet if you could get access to technology somewhere else, which would be great from a business continuity and disaster planning point of view. The question about mixed technology, it's certainly possible to do it. What we haven't got is individual microphones and cameras in the actual room where we would meet. So if, for example, you take many big councils, so district or county council or unitary authorities, they'll often have camera setups that are pre-programmed to aim at certain positions within the room, and when you press your button to speak, your microphone comes on and the camera then focuses on that person, and you could then integrate that with virtual video conferencing. But I think it would be a challenge. We certainly couldn't do it at this moment in time, and there would be a cost to council of getting the necessary equipment to put in. And it would need to be mobile equipment as well, because obviously we've got a mixed use room. So it's not a case of just having it set up and left there. So there would be a few challenges. Certainly it's possible, but I haven't got any idea of what the costs would be at this moment in time, and we would need to get some external advice on that.
Thank you. I particularly like to point out, Town Clerk, that it would help, certainly on planning meetings, where we would keep everything burning in the town hall, just sometimes for 2 or 3 agenda items. So it can be cost effective sometimes on the planning, and dependent on weather as well. Councillor Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realise it was still up. I was just going to concur with Councillor Dennis. I think the hybrid meeting is really good. I mean, sometimes myself, with my disability, I found these Zoom meetings more suitable than attending a proper meeting because I haven't got the travelling involved. Luckily, I've been supported by our councillors, been able to get to meetings, but there are certain circumstances where it might not be so easy. And obviously, it'd be easier for me in those situations. Thank you.
Councillor Saxon, I can't see you, but I can see you've got your microphone on. If you'd like to, I can hear you.
Disappeared. It's blowing a gale here, and it's terrible. No, yeah, the town clerk. I agree with what the town clerk says. It's good. We take the advantage of having the choice. That's where it stops.
Sorry, can you just turn your video off, Councillor Saxon? You was clear until you turn your video back on. You've got an internet connection problem. I think this was Councillor Tony Tarr was trying to explain.
Is it off now? Is it off?
If you leave it at that and keep talking, we can hear you.
Right. So yes, as I say, I agree with the town clerk. It's optional. We've got a town hall there with a large conference room with a room there, purpose built, and we want to sit in their own house and talk to a screen. People, what you look at people, you can't tell what they're thinking. The one person's speaking in the town, you can only see one person. You don't know what the others are doing, what they're saying, what the body language is. It's wrong. It's wrong, and it's about money again. It's about time saving. It's the best thing to do is, if we do planning, I agree with small, but management and town council should always be face to face with the mayor there in front. It's typical because what's happened with the mayor making now. It can't be done virtual because it's against the law. It's got to be a public meeting. It's got to be done. But I agree. Let's take the option. You don't have to get panicking, and council decide what they want to do about it when it happens. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have just brought public speaking into planning at East Lindsey. It's something that we have to, because the officers were having their view, but the applicants weren't having their view. And we thought that was very unfair. And we put that forward and we put it to full council, and full council supported it. And we tried it the last time, and I'm sure that that Billy, Richard and Dick was well aware it worked very well. And I do think there is a way to make it all work. And I would certainly go for that. And expense wise, you know, the camera technology today, it's getting cheaper by the day. So it's not undoable for, it's not the wit of man, I'm sure we can sort it out. And I think that would be a good thing. You want all things for everybody. You know, you get somebody who's ill or got a cold, they can't turn out, but they, you know, but they can do it virtually. As Councillor Cunnington said, it gives him his independence. He doesn't have to rely on other people. He can still attend the meeting. So I think it's all round, and the carbon footprint issue as well. I totally, you know, all things to all men, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
can I just remind Councillor Saxon and Councillor Barry, you've still got your microphones on. Councillor Mark Anderson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to raise the issue which I said in the previous report about the tablets. Here we, as what's been highlighted by Councillor Brooks, we have a councillor who, as what he has said, can't participate because he hasn't got the IT structure. That should not happen. That should not happen at all. You know, and we should know about these things to make sure that doesn't happen, to what I said on a previous paper. So can I ask you, Mr. Mayor, to make sure the councillor that Councillor Brooks has told us about gets proper a tablet from somewhere so he can participate in meetings like this? Thank you.
Yes, I think the technology is there. Looking at it, I just think that they probably need some guidance and assistance in using it. I mean, we're all quite careful. I'm aware. I just can't see him at this moment in time. It's displayed off my screen, but I do believe that Councillor Claxton tonight is doing it from a mobile phone. So I think it's just probably a little bit of training. Are you on a phone, Simon? Yeah, I think so. Looking at the angle, and I think you see a lot of this on the television when reporters are doing interviews. It's blurred out on the two sides because they do it on a phone. So I think some of it is just down to a little bit of some of it's down to internet connection, and some of it's down to a little bit of training. And I would ask the clerk to point it out. If people are having problems, feel free to email the clerk, and I'm sure you know you can set aside half an hour to get something up and running and see where we can have some practice. If it needs a few engagement of other councillors, then I'm sure there's a few of us that are willing to butt in and let you control it and practice. So, you know, feel free to email in. Don't be stuck there and thinking that you're not having your say. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Mr. Mayor, you just reiterated just what I was about to say. And my question to the clerk in my original first comment was, have the council approached councillors that are struggling to confirm that they are able to participate appropriately? Because it could well just be a piece of advice to state, look, if you're having difficulty, where are you sat? How close are you to your router? Are you now in a bedroom when otherwise you would have used it in the kitchen? These are the sorts of questions and prompts that I don't know whether the council has had this conversation with people. With regards to the equipment that's loaned in the form of the tablets should be more than sufficient. And I don't mean to be quite blunt, but all councillors receive an allowance in order to facilitate some of their council duties. And yes, of course, it's not going to stretch to an all singing, all dancing device, but you know, that is exactly what it's intended for. Councillors don't really tend to draw down expenses at parish level. There's that allowance there to fund appropriate equipment for them to either travel or their fuel or their suits that they might have to buy, or even a device for them to connect to a remote meeting. But yeah, question to the clerk was, A, have the council engaged with the councillors that are struggling. And I believe it's already proposed and seconded that we support the clerk in lobbying this. If it hasn't been seconded, I gladly will.
Okay, thank you. Just before I bring the town clerk in, if I could just ask the town clerk first, before he answers, if he could put an email together for tomorrow morning when he's in work to ask the councillors. You know, there's nothing to be ashamed of. If we can't work it, there's a way around it. Let's help each other. You know, we're supposed to be a team. There's no me, you know, no I. Let's work together. And I would ask you to reply genuinely. If you're struggling, then please, you know, get in touch, because I think this is the way forward. And hopefully the town clerk will put an email out for that. And please respond how you feel. If you're struggling, please make it known, because even at district meetings, I see people struggling. You know, not everybody. And if the internet connection's dreadful, you can find yourself pushing your microphone button half a dozen times yourself. So I'll ask the town clerk if he could do an email, and I would like councillors to respond honestly. If you're struggling, let us know. Town clerk, please, could you answer Dan Kirk's question, please?
We've had conversations early on with a couple of councillors who were a bit concerned about the technology. We haven't specifically gone around each councillor and asked that question, but I can certainly send an email out to do that. I mean, I think what we experienced tonight, I would suggest that there are probably 2 councillors who have got problems with their internet connection, and one of those has also got problems with the device on which they're trying to access the internet. So you know, that's the bottom line. I mean, in terms of the price of equipment, you can get some relatively cheap equipment. There are different technologies out there now. You can get Chromebooks, you can get Microsoft, you can get different platforms. They don't have to be Microsoft, and sometimes those other platforms are adequate to get you onto the internet and into this type of meeting. I mean, recently I've gone for a Chromebook myself, and that actually works a lot better than the Microsoft version, because it's and it's a lot cheaper as well. So there are options out there that don't have to be horrendously expensive. And in terms of the actual link, it might be worth looking at your internet service providers to see what they're offering. Are they actually meeting with what you're supposed to be getting? There are tests that you can do with your internet connection to see what type of bandwidth you're getting and whether you're getting what you're paying for. So there are things that we can do around that. But if we find out who's got what, then we can a bit more information out to you to help you.
Thank you. So I do believe it's been proposed and seconded that we go this way. It'd be a shame to do away with it, right, and not lobby, as I said, certainly for some planning meetings where we have 1 or 2 items, severe weather and things. It's been known, and we've trenched out for 5 minutes and switched all the heating and lights on. So we've had it proposed and seconded.
Mayor, I think
Councillor Barry's put his hand up now. Councillor Barry, please. Councillor Barry, you've got your microphone on. Off, I mean, sorry, that's it.
I think he's having trouble with his internet there, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor Barry, we can hear you now.
Oh yes, I'm just having trouble with the internet. It's the connection. I mean, I do have the faster broadband and everything like that. I am technical minded with the internet, but I'm just having trouble tonight. That's all it is. I've had to change 2 iPads. One went down on the battery, of course, and now I'm recharging it at the same time and moved into different positions. No, I'm quite happy with it. It's just that I'm just getting a bad connection tonight. Maybe it's the bad weather. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's a difficult one. I nothing better than to be all in the same room debating these things. I can assure you, it's been a long old time. So we've had it. Dan Kirk, sorry, you've got your hand up again. These little yellow hands.
Sorry, it's very quick with regards to the hybrid approach. I think it's very much like what the teachers are facing and have faced. It's really, really technically difficult to have a hybrid virtual and physical meeting for the microphones that are needed, as the clerk said, multi-camera things. The technology for that sort of thing to be automated is extremely expensive. I mean, tens of thousands of pounds. And if we had a more manual approach with, just somebody moving a webcam to see people, that would be all well and good, but you'd need the staff and personnel to do that, which in turn would be a HR cost. So I think it's either 100% online or no online, but that's just to add my point. I think we've discussed this far too much now, and I'd like to propose that we've done all that. Let me shut up.
Thank you. We've proposed in second. Just bring Councillor Danny Brooks in because he's got his hand up, little yellow hand there. Sorry, Councillor Brooks.
No, Mr. Mayor, I was just voting for it. I've gone a bit too.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so it's been proposed in second.
Sorry.
Let's go to the vote. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Right, if you just bear with me, I've got to move on to agenda item 8. Unfortunately, I was one of the people that picked up the wrong pack and I've got it missing. So, agenda item number 9. Weddings at the Tower Gardens Pavilion, report and appendix attached. To consider the findings and recommendations from the report and explore the possibility of holding wedding ceremonies in the Tower Garden Pavilion. Town Clerk, please.
Just before I start, some councillors have raised a number of issues along the way of why doesn't the pavilion enable us to do this or why doesn't it enable us to do that. It does what was agreed it would do by council or COVID permitting. Weddings, for those that were have been councillors for some time, you'll recall originally we were looking at a much bigger building at a much larger expense that did all sorts of things. It had, kiosk facilities, shops. It had provision for weddings and other things going on. The bottom line was that council couldn't afford that. We didn't get the grant support. We couldn't afford it. So we went ahead with something that was scaled back from that. And so weddings within that business plan became something for a stage 2, a phase 2, a bit like the Heritage Centre in that sense. I've gone through and done a quick SWOT analysis. What's quickly come to reality is that the layout of the building isn't really suitable as a wedding venue. We would have to go to Lincolnshire County Council. We would need to get a license for it. I think we would struggle to actually get the license in the sense that we haven't got the other rooms that you normally have. And the fact that you've got to go through the cafe into that area at a time for a ceremony probably isn't suitable. We already on our fees and charges list have it available as a party venue. So if somebody chose to hold their wedding reception there, they could do. We wouldn't be catering a full sit-down meal there. They could have a chat about what we're able to do. But if it's during a time when the cafe's open, the actual capacity of the cafe kitchens to deliver something substantial would be very difficult when the cafe is open. But they could have a party there. We could let it for that purposes. There are restrictions on things like alcohol and the number of, we'd have to have special event licenses, and there's a limited number of those that you can get unless you've got your own in-house license holder. So I think, I pretty much came to the conclusion that at this moment in time, it's just not feasible to for us to consider it as a wedding venue where you would have both the ceremony and the reception. And if somebody wants to use it for party, wedding party, then they can look at that, but they would have to organise most of it themselves. The one area which I think we could look at, and we would be looking at something that would be very infrequent, is where perhaps somebody who wants to use it for the wedding reception, and they are perhaps severely disabled and require the changing places facility, because this is one of the few places locally that has that type of facility available. I think, as part of a community offering, then that would be something that we could perhaps support and look to support. As I say, they'd be very few and far between, but given that we've got those special facilities there, it would seem right that we could then make an arrangement where somebody could use that facility so that they could have a wedding party as everybody else. So those are my recommendation is really that it's not progressed at this stage. I don't see, we haven't got the money or the resources or the right type of building at this moment in time to move forward with it. So I don't think it would offer the revenue stream that was perhaps hoped for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take the clerk's recommendations on board, and I actually do quite agree. Although it's disappointing, I think the logistics is quite difficult, and if this huge piece of work is done and there's not much interest, then it could potentially be wasted. What I would like to see, however, there's still be an aspiration on the business plan, for sure, and I'd also like the clerk to report either monthly or quarterly as to if any requests for this service do come about. Because if we find out, oh yeah, we've had 6 requests for questions whether a wedding venue, then that is more of a significant factor for us to drive this. If we get no requests over 12 months, then maybe it just reinforces the clerk's recommendations. So I'd happily propose that we support the clerk's recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay, please.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a tricky one. I know it is, because obviously the way things are at the moment, it's not ideal. I would like to know, and if possible, please, Mr. Mayor, if the town clerk can answer these couple of things, is rather than we go any further, is firstly, are we still looking at the option of bookings for later on in the year, or are we just not taking any bookings at the moment? And are we waiting until restrictions are lifted before we even start looking at the bookings? On the side of the weddings, unfortunately, I'm one of the people that watches Don't Tell the Bride, where they take a completely empty room with a completely empty garden, flash it up themselves, and they make it look amazing. They bring in their own vicars and do their own receptions and do everything once they find a venue. So it's not impossible if somebody came along to rent the venue. It's not impossible to transform it into a very nice place. And lastly, there are doors to the side of the building that can access the green area, so you wouldn't necessarily have to use access through the cafe. And finger buffets are quite normal at a lot of receptions. But if the town clerk could answer those before we move on, Mr. Mayor, please, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Town clerk, please.
Well, as I've already said, there is already provision for somebody to book the room if they want to. That's already there. We have taken and we have got bookings from regular customers, some of whom have already paid and are just we're holding the bookings for them. They're ones that are regular, so regular slots every week, and we're holding their money so that they will start again as soon as they're able to, and we're able to open the hall. I mean, clearly at the moment we're in lockdown. What we don't know is whether all of the regular bookings that we had on the books prior to the autumn lockdown will come back, because I fear that some of the smaller organisations, you know, may have disappeared or may have foundered. We'll have to wait and see on that. There's nothing to stop at this moment in time somebody coming forward and saying we would like to book, you know, the hall for June or July or whatever, and we have got bookings. We've got bookings through to, I know we've got bookings for next August, for example. So it is possible, but where we struggle is with it as a wedding ceremony venue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Anderson, please.
Yeah, I supported Councillor Cunnington's motion on this because when we discussed it, we thought it's a good income generator for the council and on behalf of the council taxpayer of Skegness. So I'd like to see it actually happening in the future, and I understand where the town clerk is coming from regarding the full wedding as what he has described, but there is the opportunity to hold, as what has been said, a reception. Now, I know places in Skegness that do hold receptions in their gardens with a marquee, and I would like to see that kind of scenario where you have a beautiful setting in the Tower Gardens, where a marquee could be put on the side, and then the hall used with outside caterers, etc. That kind of letting is what's stuck in my mind until we get the extension that we want in our business plan that we said. But in answer to Dan Kirk, Councillor Kirk, if we don't promote something, you don't get the answers. And if you don't market anything, then you just don't grow. So, you know, in answer to the question, you don't just sit back and think, well, people will come to me. That's not the case. You have to go out there and get the people to come to you. Thank you.
Could I just come back, just reiterate again, there's nothing to stop somebody booking the hall for a wedding reception now. They could do that. We've already set fees and charges for that type of thing. The idea of the marquee, something that I've raised before, we just need to wait until the grass area has established itself. So realistically, I think we're looking at 2022 for that. We may have to look, because the doors between the hall and the outside area, primarily fire exits, we'd need to look at that, how that would work. We have used them for certain activities during COVID to allow an in and an out to the small and medium halls. So yeah, I mean, there's no problem in terms of the hall booking. You know, when we were at this time last year, prior to COVID coming in, we were virtually fully booked. I mean, that was the situation we're in. We had bookings every day, and also for Saturdays for most of the year. So I think, you know, the demand is definitely there, and I think it's going to be a big success. But I would re-emphasise, you know, we had our business plan. We haven't had the opportunity to implement it yet because of COVID, and I think we need that full year to be able to implement it properly, get the cafe working, get the hall bookings done. It's just that we've been stymied by COVID and all of the difficulties that that's brought with it. And I think, you know, the hall will be a success going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I assisted the town clerk a year ago, 18 months ago, whatever it was, in setting the charges for the hall, the private hire charge, so for somebody to book it for a party, was set at a rate so that we were not undercutting those commercial ventures in town, because of course that would be totally wrong for a town council to use council taxpayers' money to pay for a building and then undercut the businesses around. I think all we need to do is slightly look at this recommendation. Recommendation 4.1 is the management committee. I recommended the idea is not progressed. What, and town clerk, please correct me if I'm wrong, what all you're recommending there is we don't progress the idea of holding the actual civil part of a wedding service. That's the bit that, you know, costs £1,000 that then you have to have everything in place for. But as for running it as a wedding venue for the after servicing, well, of course we should be promoting that, because it's a superb venue. It was probably one of the best in the town because of all the green open spaces you can have, the trees, the brilliant photos you can have. Imagine photos in autumn in Tower Gardens if you had an autumn wedding, how superb that would be. So I would like to have this recommendation changed, that the management committee are recommended that the idea of using the Tower Gardens Pavilion for the ceremony is not progressed, but we still should be promoting it as a fantastic place for the residents of Skegness to have their receptions.
Thank you. Councillor Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank the clerk for his report. He's obviously put a bit of effort into this to get it ready for us in such a short time, because obviously we asked for it within a couple of months. The original motion was never set out, and it never stated to hold a full sit-down meal. It was all about offering what we had to offer, which is the size of the building, the capacity of the building, and a buffet-style meal to suit what we can offer. If we can't offer what people want, they will go elsewhere. If they can take what we can offer, then that's great to them, and it's an option for them. But it's all for the public to take their options. And totally what Councillor Kirk's just said, if we can't offer the ceremony, the registrar and things, as far as I'm aware, are still on the industrial estate, which is a 2 or 3 minute drive away. They can take everything else to the new town hall once they've been to, I think it's a business centre on the industrial estate still. They can then come across to the town hall, to Tower Gardens, to do the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk, did you still have your hand up from last time? Yeah. Councillor Mark Anderson.
Sorry, I had my hand up from last time.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
I've just in reply to Councillor Cunnington, that's what we already have in place. We already have a booking system for weddings, wedding receptions with the catering that we have available. My understanding, the whole point of the original motion was to seek whether we could conduct the civil. That's actively been marketed. That's available. The clerk is saying we're getting bookings. So,
Thank you. Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I can see that we're doing wrong is probably not paying the £1,000 to get the licence, which, you know, if it's not available to us, we could still do small weddings. And if they're 40 or 50 people, we can cope with that. The catering can be done outside. Outside caterers could come in and do 40 or 50 people. And the people are going to pay for it. It's really not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Danker. Okay, did I hear a proposal that we go with the recommendation, or just yellow hands and my screen's flashing all over? Dankirk?
I proposed that on my first speaking session, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
I thought there was an amendment, Mr. Mayor, by
Steve Kirk. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Steve Kirk made the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Finlay. I've got my screens flashing away with the hands. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you. The original was to explore all avenues and the ability to use a community hub as a wedding to hold, including wedding ceremonies. I'm suggesting that we forget about now, sorry, and then the recommendation is that we reject that whole thing. What I'm saying is that we just need to make it quite clear that if we take recommendation 4.1, the bit that we are actually recommending we don't continue is the holding of the civil ceremony, not that we don't hold wedding venues. I was just trying to tidy up the recommendation because it looked like we were rejecting the entire Councillor Cunnington's motion, which was to explore all things around weddings. So all I was tidying it up to make it perfectly clear that the only bit that we are recommending that we don't proceed is with the civil ceremony part, not that we shouldn't use it for wedding receptions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk, you including that in your proposal?
Yeah, that was my understanding. The whole debate was around the specific ceremony. That other stuff's already in place. So yeah, that was my understanding.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Tony Ty, please.
Yes, exactly. I concur with what Councillor Kirk has said.
Okay, are you willing to second that, Councillor Ty?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Okay, bear with me. Moving on to the next agenda item, number 10. Jolly Fisherman procedure, the report is attached. Committee to describe what the council wants to put in place and to provide associated resource to achieve this.
Mayor, I'm sure we've had conversations and many councillors have commented on, when Jolly coming back, etc. And I guess as we come out of lockdown this summer, the expectation will be that the Jolly Fisherman character appears in the town again. If it got rather left at the back, well, even the beginning, I think, of last year, actually, as to how council were going to move this forward in a safe way that's insured and that meets our obligations as a town councillor, as a town council, and if we're using volunteers, how we're going to manage them. Now, issues around the actual costume itself. Councillor Ty currently is looking after the costume for the council. But there's also issues around the actual operation and administration of Jolly as well. So if you've got people inside the costume, they shouldn't be in there for more than 20 minutes. These are the recommendations that come from those bodies which look after theatrical people who actually operate this type of character. So you should have 20 minutes out for every 20 minutes in, and they need a minder as well. And presumably council would want to be conscious of, having somebody changing in and out of character in public view. If as is likely, are going to be with children in any way, then DBS clearance would be needed. There's all of the issues that I raised previously about the managing the hygiene of the costume. And again, there's a council responsibility. If it's a council character and the council is running this, then the responsibility lies with the council to make sure that the costume is clean, hygienic, that it's not shared between people without being properly cleaned. I mean, at this moment in time, obviously we can't use it, but there's a whole load of issues around there. There's then the ongoing storage, moving, and where somebody changes. So having a suitable storage place, it needs to be dry, airy. There needs to be a facility to actually transport whoever's going and for them to have somewhere to change in and out of the costuming. We haven't got that in place. If you're then looking at the booking and administration side, I don't know whether council were expecting this to be something that is bookable by members of the public. or organisations, in which case you suddenly start to set an expectation in terms of what happens if you're using volunteers, what happens if the volunteer is not available or can't go, and that's late on. Especially if you've promised that that's going to happen, have you got sufficient backup? How is it going to be organised? We know from just the practice of dealing with the mayor's diary how much toing and froing there can be to get dates, and information properly documented so that we've got that to hand, contact details. And if you've then got volunteers who are going to be part of that, is contacting them, making sure that they're available, knowing what the backup arrangements are going to be if they suddenly become unavailable. So there's a whole load of administration that could easily sit behind this if it's going to be opened up to the public. If it's just going to be alongside appearances alongside the mayor, then that's a lot easier to manage because we're just dealing with mayoral events which we're already organising. So there's less administration involved in that, albeit we would still need to be in contact with the volunteers who are operating the character. We haven't got a budget provision for this, and we also need to be aware that with our insurance that we discussed earlier on, if we're going to do this on any sort of regular basis, then that's going to lift us out of the base level insurance for volunteers because it'll be more of a regular thing that we're doing. So I think council needs to articulate exactly what it wants to do, what it's required, and think very carefully about the costs, implications, and the expectations that may be raised. Because if we've booked Jolly and then Jolly doesn't turn up, who is going to be to blame? It will be the council. So especially if it's a big event. So there needs to be proper management of that. And if council undertake the management of the Jolly, it needs to be done in a professional manner with all the appropriate paper trails and administration in place, because it's about liability and showing to our insurers that we've done this properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay, please.
Yeah, obviously the write-up of it, what you've done, Town Clerk, is fantastic. It's so detailed, it pretty much tells us everything we need to find out, how much it's going to cost to do us. So I'd like to think that at the moment, Jolly's not likely to be used until probably March, April time at the very least, if we're lucky. So we've got time to basically break this down and maybe get costings for it. It does tell you about insurance, it does tell you about cleaning, it does tell you about, there's so much involved in it, DBS checks. We've got time to maybe find people that have DBS checked. We've got time to cost up, and then we can actually get a full costing of how much it will cost based on this list of what's required, to keep him going. We know after previous events that the Jolly Fisherman is what Skegness want, it's what the visitors want, it's what most of us want. So I think if we spent the time breaking this down and costing it and giving us an idea of how much it'll cost, it'll give us a better chance of how we can keep running him. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis, please.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I agree with Councillor Finlay, absolutely. And what I think the councillors that are keen to progress this should form a working group with themselves and go away and come back with a package to councillors and see where we're going to move it on from here. I think it would be an opportunity, as Councillor Finlay said, not to be missed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to comment? Councillor Mark Anderson, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Dennis. I'm looking at income generating for the council. If a working group can be set up and then charging element be put against the use of the Jolly Fisherman to offset the costs, then and make a small profit, then I'm all in favour of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burnham?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to agree with Councillor Dennis. We need to form a working group and find out the exact costings, and then we can look at other avenues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So everybody's in favour of forming a working group. When can we form that group, Town Clerk?
Well, you can form it tonight and choose your member. I mean, the whole of council is invited to management. I know there's a couple of people who are not here, but you can form the working group, appoint to it this evening, and then that group can. I mean, I would suggest the first thing that group actually do is actually decide or put a plan together of what it is that the proposal is, because there's quite a few questions about the way in which Jolly could be managed, and I think those need to be answered, because then once you know that, you can then work out the costs. Don't know exactly the way in which you're doing it, and you won't be able to have any certainty over the costs.
Okay, thank you. Danny Brooks, please. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank the clerk for his work on this report, because I think it's exceptional. The only thing missing is the costing. So I agree with the councillors, as long as we can find out how much it's going to cost, and then you can sort out whether you want to go for members of the public or just out with the mayor. Once you've got all the figures, until you've got the figures, we could all say, oh, put it out every week. But until we've got the figures, we won't know. And it could be an income generator, or it could just be, well, we'll have to put it out with the mayor because it would cost too much otherwise. But until we've got the figures, we won't know. So I totally agree with the others. Thank you.
Yeah, fully agree with you. And I think if there is a business opportunity there for businesses to promote, and they want to, if there's some fees involved and they cover them, fine. But of course, it's got to be vetted on where he goes and what venue. You know, he can't just turn up at anywhere. So I appreciate all that. Councillor Finlay, please.
Yeah, just a question to the clerk, really. I'm just wondering what would be our way forward. Obviously, if we vote tonight on the working group and that ticks that box, who would work out the costings? Obviously, as it's council and you're the finance man, Town Clerk, would you work out based on your breakdown the costings of what you estimate it could cost us, and then bring it back to the working group? Is that how it would work?
Well, I think there's some questions that need to be answered in there first. So it is a bit chicken and egg like, but for example, you might decide we don't want to run the risk of it being run with a volunteer because that's too risky. We'll employ someone to do it. Therefore, that would have an additional cost. There could be, if you decide it's going to be open for booking, for example, then that's going to have an administrative burden, and we would need to look at what that is. But again, it depends on the number. So if we've got, several times a week bookings, then that's going to place a lot more emphasis on the resource than if we have it once a month. So I think what the working group needs to do is to make some assumptions around what it expects to see, and that will then give me a basis to go away and cost it. Otherwise, it's very difficult to actually come up with some firm figures. I mean, I'm sure we can get some costs for the easy things like cleaning the costume, but then that cost depends on how often you need to clean it, and that depends on how often it's being used and by how many people. So if you've got one person using it, you can get away with cleaning it less often than if you've got several people using it. So I think there's a whole series of things to bottom out first, and then once we've got that, once the working group have got its model, then it could be possible for me to go away and cost it. Otherwise, I'm going to be costing up lots and lots of different potential options, and that's going to take time, and I'm not sure how accurate the costs are going to be, because you might then come back and say, oh, well, we don't want to do it that way, we want to do it in a slightly different way, and then the costs are going to be wrong again. So I think group work out, this is what we would like to do, you know, as a start. And then if the group then sees, well, actually, this is looking really expensive, it might then go away and come up with a different idea. And then it could bring both of those back to council to say, well, we've looked at these two options and these are the ones, you know, this one's going to cost more and this one's not going to cost so much. Therefore, you know, we make a recommendation based on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks, I think you left your hand up from last time. Am I correct?
I have, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to follow hands. Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the questions you're asking, I can give you the answers to. I was running the Jolly for 5 years as a going concern. So I can answer most of those problems that you've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tye. I trust that when we form this committee, you will be one of the first to put your hand up. So first name up. So I'll just bear that in mind if you'd like to lower your hand. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With this working group, I wouldn't want you to get too carried away with the idea of income generation. Councillor Tye will recall that when the partnership ran it, there was the idea that there should be income generation. There was a fee for the charge for the Jolly, and it wasn't a roaring success, even though we weren't paying members of staff to administer it. A lot of the admin was done by Councillor Tye and other members of the board, and quite a bit of it was done by Stephen Krause, paid for by East Lindsey District Council because he was a town manager at that time. So I think the town clerk's quite right. We need to decide exactly what we want the purpose of Jolly to be. If it's going out with the mayor and doing, you know, Carnival Week and things like that, that's one thing. But if it's then going out to promote businesses, I think we'll find that a lot of the businesses quite like the idea of having Jolly until they realise there's a charge to go with it.
Yeah, thank you. So I think what we need to do is what Councillor Sid Dennis said. We need to set up a group, really, and I think that's what we should do. So I think we should do that tonight, really. So have we got anybody that's willing to? Councillor Billy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be more than willing to go on the working group.
Okay, thank you. I thought Councillor Tye would be bouncing up there straight away with his hand up, but I don't think he was quick enough with his internet connection. Councillor Tye, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was sitting back just to hear what other councillors had got to say, and I was absolutely amazed that somebody didn't say put my name forward straight away. But there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
yes.
well I did, but nobody was listening to me. I think they've all got they've dropped out. The connection's dropped out.
Yeah.
Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, I'd like to be put forward to the working group, and I'd like to see a lot more councillors on it, please, if it's possible. But definitely me, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I put myself. I'm quite happy to go on it. It's something, and I think whoever does the Jolly, and I mean whoever's been in the suit, I think they do get, you know, they have a good time in it. It's a fun time, a lot of attention, and I think, you know, it just about says it all about being a volunteer inside it. You know, it's fun. Councillor Saxon's got his hand up. Yeah, I think he wants to go down on it. That's it. Thumbs up. Thank you. Have we got any more? Could do another one or two, really. Councillor Barry.
Yes, I'd like to get onto that committee if it's possible.
Okay, thank you. Town clerk, how many have we got there? We got 5 or 6 there, I think. Sorry, you're on mute. I can't. You're on mute. I can't understand a word what you're saying. I can see your mouth moving underneath
I'm
your.
dodgy. I'm moving around so fast on the screen that I can't click my unmute button.
I can't see with all the growth tonight. I can't see the light.
We have 6.
We have 6. Councillor Adrian Finlay, would you like to come back in and have a say?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, obviously, there's some councillors been tonight, like Jimmy and Simon, that's not even here. If we pick it tonight, is it not possible to send out an email? I know it's probably not the norm, Town Clerk, but is it possible to send out an email to councillors that can't make the meeting tonight? Obviously, with it being quite an important group, well, they're all important groups, but this one in particular feel like they might have missed out on something and a possibility of joining a group that they might have input on. Thank you.
I can certainly send an email out, but what I would say is, in my experience, the larger the group, the less productive it becomes, because you have too many views, can't be resolved, and you end up with loads and loads of meetings without getting anywhere. A smaller focus group can often get more done.
Yeah, thank you. Town clerk, send the email out, because I put my name forward because I think this is something that we all feel passionately about. But I'm quite happy to sit out and let one of the other councillors take my place. We all work together. So if they really want to do it, I'm quite happy to sit out. So please send the email, please. So we have a group. I'm doing it from my phone now. Sorry. Do we need to approve any more on this, Town clerk? You're on mute again. Sorry.
It's just the vote to set up the group and to appoint those.
Okay, we've got a list then of 6. As I said, I'm quite happy to drop out, and we can involve the council again to get somebody else instead of myself. But all in favour, then please show.
I think it needs proposing and seconding, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, proposed. Sure, one
I'll
of the
propose
volunteers.
it. Yep.
You'll propose it. Proposer and seconder, Councillor Danny Brooks, second Billy Brooks, all in favour, and you've raised your hands. Thank you very much. Okay, I would just ask now that we're moving on to the next agenda item. Just times like this, I wish I'd have picked the pack up with all the papers in. Agenda item 11 is the planning policy, and I know some of you is going to drop out, but I would like to see some of the councillors stay back, apart from the ones that do have to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you to all those who attended. Thank you.
Could I ask the clerk to
Sorry,
remove me, please?
Sorry.
Could I ask the clerk to remove me, please, because my system won't let me do it.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Councillor Cunnington. Okay.
Clerk, will you be correct if I leave for planning?
Got Councillor Finley still there at this moment in time, just about. But obviously, I don't know what the declarations are going to be. As Councillor Saxon's coming back in.
Okay. Councillor Dan Brooks, you got your hand up?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I don't know where.
Has Councillor Dan Kirk got a recording studio in his place now? That's the big question.
He's got everything. Extensions a lot.
Even a cat.
Even the cat. Cool with the cat. Look
We're
at
certainly
that.
corporate at this moment.
Right. Hopefully everybody will stay in the room. That would allow Councillor Kirk to leave, providing that everybody else stays in the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Okay. Moving on. As I said, I'm sorry about this. I'm having to do it from my phone. Moving on to agenda item number 11, the planning applications. 11.1, City Hall, for the planning permission, erection of garden room. At 10 o'clock.
So this is the area here with the garden room at the back. These are all hand drawings. So it's a flat roofed structure, 2.4 meters by 4.2. This is the special area of scientific interest, so that borders that area. So I don't think it's for us to really to be concerned in respect of whether or not this complies with any restrictions in that, because that will be picked up by East Lindsey District Council. There have been no public comments on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to propose that we support the application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Seconded.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. If we could have Councillor Finley, Councillor Kirk has put his hand up, Councillor Finn's put his hand up, Councillor Saxon, and myself. Yeah, they're all for. Thank you. Was you for, Councillor Barry? Was you okay with that? For? Yeah, thank you. So there's a few internet connections going down tonight, I think. Okay, moving on to 11.2, the platform housing group, planning permission, erection of a number 6 blocks of 3 houses, 18 houses, 17 number pairs of semi-detached houses, 2 number of blocks of 4 numbers houses, and 60 dwellings in total, including the erection of boundary walls and fences, erection of an electricity substation, provision of car park construction and vehicle and pedestrian access, and internal estate roads. That's at land at Rowland Way, Skegness. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got no problems with the whole concept of social housing that we desperately need in Skegness. What I have concerns of is the size of the properties. Those of you who have been inside some of these properties, they are very, very small. If the town clerk can actually go and have a look at the measurements inside of these properties, they are tiny. And, you know, when it comes down to housing standards, living in such small accommodation like that isn't very nice, especially now if you're in lockdown, living in small accommodation like that, but it's desperately needed. I think the only comment I would make, although I'd move the recommendations, is that East Lindsey look at the size of the properties that are on offer by this housing association. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with Councillor Anderson. We desperately need houses in Skegness, and I feel that this is why they put in these small houses, knowing that we wouldn't turn them down because we're desperate for them. But I just think they're skimping, and like Mark Anderson, Councillor Mark Anderson says, you know, if you was living in that smaller house, you know, it's tiny, but because you're desperate, you'll take it. But I obviously wouldn't turn it down again, same as Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Councillor Dankirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a question of those that are more experienced, whether or not the discussion that we're having is actually material planning grounds, or is it just a general case that if a developer wants, you know, I appreciate your point, but we can only really make objections based on, you know, assets that could be impacted, access, highways, so those sorts of nature. Just the size of the properties. What I can say is it in keeping with properties in the area? The answer's probably yes. So for that reason, I think we should support it. I'm not sure whether anybody with more planning experience could add some further clarity.
If it helps, the size is not a material planning issue.
I thought not.
It meets the legal requirements, and the minimum size for a home is actually laid out in the local plan, and almost certainly for us to be consulted on it, it does exceed those. Tiny they are, but tiny is what you're allowed to build.
Okay.
Can I just come back?
Yes, I was going to ask yourself or Councillor Kirk and Councillor Anderson, please do.
Thank you. You can actually object on density, and obviously you could take that into consideration. The question, and I think I made, was a separate issue to East Lindsey District Council, although it's not a planning issue, it's the issue of the size of the properties for a family. You're talking about 2-bed houses here, and you could have 4 people living in those small houses, because the lounge could be classed under the housing standards as a bedroom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Tyre, please.
Yes, I was going to say that I totally agree with Councillor Kirk. The problem you've got is planning protocols that they fit the bill. So, you know, I mean, it's a matter of, I know Councillor Anderson is probably against it simply because of the size. They are very small. I mean, I've been looking to try and pick up how many meters they are, but they look very small. And some that was up earlier on, one house that Town Clerk put up was actually 3-bedroomed. And if you look at the ground floor, 3 bedrooms in that ground floor would be very small.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I don't think Councillor Anderson was rejecting it. I think he was just making a point of that we need to point out that the size of them, unless I misread that, but I'm sure that's what he meant. Councillor Danny Brooks, you still got your hand up, unless you haven't dropped it from last time.
No, would like to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Please do.
Yes, Councillor Anderson wasn't rejecting it, and nor was I. And legally, it's correct. Morally, who knows?
Okay,
but I still support it because we need houses at whatever size.
So I'm right in thinking that Councillor Anderson proposed it and you've seconded it, Councillor Brooks?
It was myself, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Dankirk. You'll have to
Yes,
forgive me.
yes, I did propose it, Mr. Mayor, and you're absolutely right. I wanted to make a statement to East Lindsey District Council, who have this housing association as a partner, about the size of the properties for a family. That was a separate issue to the planning that I moved. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think, right, okay, we've got a proposal and a seconder. All in favour, please.
Just before we go to the vote, can I just point out that the LTC have raised an objection because of the there is an existing footpath, public right of way across here that the houses are built across. There is a suggestion that it's rerouted via the edge of the drain, but that will require also a further modification of the footpath further along outside of the site. And so at this stage, we don't know what's going to happen with that, but that was just for information more than anything. It's not part of this council's decision making.
Do we need to note in that we would want to go with the footpath round to keep the footpath in place?
You could certainly support that, yeah.
Can we do that, Councillor? Sorry.
Yes, you can, Mr. Mayor, as part of my proposal. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I just want to know if the rerouting of the footpath will add any cost to the town council if we manage that.
Okay. Thank you, Town Clerk.
That's a good question. I'd need to look at our maps and see what part. I know we do some public rights of way along that area and on the other side of Wharf Lane as well. So I'd need to check what impact that would have. Potentially it would be longer, so that could add some time. Quantifying the cost, if it's a newly laid path, it might be easier to get a mower down than the current one. So there could be some swings and roundabouts.
Okay, thank you. To answer your question, Councillor Brooks. Okay, we've got a proposal and a seconder.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. We've got a proposal and a seconder. All in favour, please show. We are getting a few gremlins tonight. Thank you. Right, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next one. Item 11.3. Mr. Smith, planning permission extension, alterations to existing dwelling to provide a large kitchen, dining room with additional bedroom on the first floor to include raised decking areas. Town Clerk, please.
That's the site plan. This is the existing, which is because it's quite difficult from the main plan without looking at this as to what the change is. It's good to look at the rear elevation, which I will. I hope you can see is over here, and then look at the proposed. And effectively, what it's doing is it's bringing this bit outwards and adding on here. So this is at the rear. This is the additional area here. So that bit there is going further out, and then in line with this, which is also going out somewhat to where it currently is.
Have we got a garden plan? Have we got a garden plan of that, Town Clerk? Is there a garden plan?
That's probably the best way of seeing it there. That shows the
Yeah, Well, I'm looking at that. I'm quite happy to propose that. I don't think they're going beyond any boundary of the neighbouring properties, so I'm happy to move that. Councillor Dan Kirk.
Put the wind out of my sails, Mr. Mayor. It's in keeping with neighbouring properties and similar floor plan sizes, so I'll happily second your adoption. Your support, sorry.
Councillor Ty, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Okay, we've had it proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, unless I've got any items missing on my phone, I'd like to thank you. It's the end of the meeting tonight. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you and seeing you at the full council meeting on Wednesday, the 3rd of February. Be mindful of my message at the beginning of the meeting. Please email in staff as well. I'm Councillor Carpenter. The thoughts are with all the family, and I'll speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.